Hello everyone and welcome back to another lesson. Today we're going to be talking about type in InDesign. You might remember we did a whole thing on type in Illustrator. We went really in depth about basically type in general, and today we're going to be breezing through type in InDesign since things will probably be much faster since you already have a basic understanding of how type works. So beyond just type, we will also be talking about how to use the grid and how to use type on the grid. We built the grid in the last lesson, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that and how to actually use it while making a book. And hopefully things will all make sense and you will be able to move forward with your books from there. So the first thing we're going to do today is we're going to go to our handy dandy Finder window. Here I am in our LA Contrast book folder, and I just dragged in the template that Shelly gave me. So hopefully you guys have the same one. If it's not the same one, it should be pretty similar. If it's the same one, just drag it into your book folder. Make sure you do that. We're setting up good practices here. And we're just going to double click this to open it in InDesign. It should look something like this. Title page as the first page, spread 1, spread 2, all these things all the way down. There should be 32 pages and 17 spreads in total. So just make sure that everything is there. Okay, so something that you might notice here is that we do not have a cover. In fact, the file is actually called the book template spreads without cover. So we will be talking about how to create the cover at the end of this lesson. So make sure you stick around for that. It's really not that difficult, but I find it best to just walk you guys through that so then there aren't any mishaps or misunderstandings. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to our master page, just like last time, up here in A Master. We're just going to double click it. We're going to set up our own little grid. I'm going to make sure that my units are where I want them. I want them as points, so that's good. Make sure you do both sides. And then I'm going to hit W on my keyboard so then we can see what the existing grid looks like. Currently, this is the setup. You'll see a little book title / header up here, and this is all on the master page, so this shows up on every single page. These are pagination, which is the page numbers, and then here is our grid system. You might also notice that when I talk about these grid systems, they actually don't have horizontal lines, they only have vertical lines. I think that when you guys sort of have this basic understanding of just like using grids and typography, it's better to just use the vertical ones and not confuse you guys with the horizontal ones, because next year you'll learn more about baselines and type proportions and all these things, and I'm simply not paid enough to walk you guys through all of that. So instead of doing that, we're just going to do sort of like the very basics of it. This is truly enough to get you guys through creating your first book, so don't worry, we're not like skimping out on you guys. You'll be able to create really great books just with this setup already. Okay, so just like last time, we're going to go up into layout and we're going to go into margins and columns. So we have made sure that our preview is on, and that's very important so you can actually see the changes. In my personal opinion, I think that these margins are extremely generous. If you want to create a design that's a little bit maybe closer to a traditional layout, you can have larger margins. This is completely up to you guys. These margins, do not listen to the ones that I create because these are just sort of like random ones that I've put together. Create your own based off of your design. And just like last time, what we talked about, sometimes you can actually start designing the book and then put these grids on afterwards. That's totally fine too. So I'm just going to do sort of like a 24, keep our inside pretty big. We'll do like a 36. Over here, we'll do 28 bottom. 36 also. So I think that this looks pretty decent. Obviously, it's, you know, it's really up to what you guys want yours to look like. And of course, you can always adjust it after you've created your design, so that's no big either. Next, we're just going to adjust some of our columns. 6 columns is actually a pretty good number, but I'm just going to, for fun, make this 7, so there's a little bit more to work with. And then I'm going to decrease these gutters to, let's do 8 points. These are things that I think should be adjusted as you design, obviously, that I've said 1,000 times. So make sure that you're creating a system that actually works for you and you're not just sort of being, trapped within your own system. Okay, so I'm going to hit OK and we're just going to move on. So here we have a book title and header. I'm going to decide that actually I don't want this in my design just because we're going to make some other elements later, and I just think that this is going to hold us back for now. So I'm going to delete this. These pagination right here, I'm going to delete these and we're going to create pagination together just so you know how to do it, because you're going to probably use this a lot in different books. So I'm just going to grab these and I'm going to delete them. So what we're going to do is I'm going to hit T on my keyboard and create a type box. And I'm just going to create a box over here. We can always move it so it doesn't really matter. So we're just going to go to type and then insert special character and then markers and then current page number. So you'll see that this immediately puts an A here, and the reason why it's an A is because it's on the A master. So I'm just going to grab this and duplicate it and put it on the other side, so then we have 2. When we click out of our master, though, you'll see that the page numbers are actually in this font, which I believe is Minion. So if we go back to the A master, we can actually adjust these, and even though it says A, when we, let's just do, if we put this in Cooper, for example, and like we make this bigger, you will see that they appear just like that on all of these spreads. So this, you might notice after we reach 10, gets kind of weird, and that's just because the box is too small for the type. So obviously we're not going to have our pagination this big, and this is just an example, so you can ignore that. Okay. So back to our A master, I'm just going to adjust these real quick so there's something that's kind of usable. So I'm just going to go ahead and put this as Forma and then make this like a size 11. And we're actually going to highlight this and grab our eyedropper tool, which we can use to match this. Afterwards, I'm just going to make both of these centered, actually. I tend to like to center my pagination just so then it kind of makes more sense. And then you can move these wherever you like. Also, just know you can put elements within the margins. The point of creating a grid system is basically so you have your own playground to work with. You don't need to keep things out of the margins just because they're called margins. For example, in like some books, you have a full bled image on some pages, and that will totally ignore, what the margins are and what the paginations are. It'll just cover the whole thing. And since that's a purposeful action, that's totally fine, and you can totally do that. So I think that this pagination looks pretty good to me. You can obviously move your pagination wherever you like it and, do whatever you think fits your books the best. So we're going to go back to our pages now. So now you see that these elements are everywhere. Looking good. So I'm going to hit W real quick, and you're going to notice that we have no bleeds right now. And like I said last week, it's very important that we have bleeds because when you print it out, you're going to have to crop them, and it's really annoying to crop without these bleeds. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to File, and we're going to go to Document Setup. And over here in bleed, I'm just going to put like 12. I find that's plenty. And we're going to hit OK. Okay, so now we are basically set up to just go ahead and learn about type. We've got all our spreads with pagination and a grid, and we know exactly what's going on all of these. So I'm just going to start on this first spread right here. I prefer the bleed not to show up in the preview, so I'm just going to turn it off here. So you might notice there's some elements here. I'm just going to delete them since we don't need them anymore. Okay, so now we've got a blank spread, and when we hit W, we can see our grid. Everything is looking good. So type in InDesign is actually really quite similar to Illustrator. However, there's a lot more you can actually do in InDesign than you can do in Illustrator. InDesign is created to do typography. It is created to have book type. So it's really well suited for obviously all those roles, while Illustrator is more generated for creating illustrations, hence the name. And you can obviously do type in it, but it's usually for more like display type, more like larger poster size type, whereas books are much more suited to have like nitty gritty fine type and make sure everything look really good, really zoomed up, as well as really good, really big. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go over here to our type tool. You can also hit T. This is the same in basically all Adobe software. And the very basics of this is we're just going to create a type box. So unlike Illustrator, you can only create text boxes with the type tool in InDesign. You can't do the thing where you click once and just go ahead and type. I believe that's because creating books is more like this modular process, and you're going to need boxes of space preset to create books, whereas Illustrator is sort of a lot more freeform. Just like in every other software, you can go ahead and just type here and, you'll get your text. I don't know how to describe that any better. You can also right click and you can fill with placeholder text in case you're, trying to just place a few things down and see what it'll look like. Similar to Illustrator, but you're probably going to need it a lot more in InDesign. You can adjust your blocks of text by adjusting the boxes. So here you'll notice that there is actually this little red plus, just like in Illustrator when you have overset type. So you can click this box and you can create a new box that'll continue the type somewhere else. So for example, if we wanted this type over here and this type on this page, we would be able to do that. And just like last time, you can adjust the amount on both sides by adjusting the size of the boxes. So let's just say you've created a bunch of type in your book and then you decided that all of the type is a little too small. So you go ahead and you adjust the type and you think, oh yeah, that size looks a little bit better, but then you go on to another page and you forget about what you just did. Something that might help you realize that you have overset type is this error panel right here, which is very crucial in InDesign. So wherever you go in your InDesign file, it's always going to stay the same and it's always going to stay here. And the error panel basically just tells you whenever you have anything from overset type over here to sort of like an unlinked image to sort of like missing files, anything like that, it'll tell you. So it'll always let you know with a red dot here. You can double click it and it'll actually tell you exactly what the issue is. So here it's overset text. And then it'll tell you it was a text frame that was overset. So for example, if we're on like spread 9 over here and we're like, oh my God, where is the issue? We have so much type. How are we ever going to find it? You can just double click it and it'll take you exactly to where the issue is. So here we can see that, this was obviously where our error was. If we fix the issue, you'll notice that it actually clears it in the pre-flight or the error panel. And then it'll also say the same thing down here, that the error has been cleared. So back to what we were doing with type. So just like last time, basically all the functions of type are, pretty similar. Here you can change the typeface. Should we do something fun? Oh, here is the CalArts typeface. Should we do that? So like, you can change the typeface here. Down here, you can change the weight. I really like the italic of this typeface. Shout out to Ben Woodlock who designed this typeface. You can also increase the size just like last time here and increase the leading down here. You will notice that when you are creating type in InDesign, there are a lot more options just sort of laid out in front of you. This is just because it's, much more suited for this kind of thing. Whereas when you're using Illustrator, Adobe knows that you're probably not going to go as nitty gritty as when you are in InDesign. So just like before, there's a bunch of different things you can do here. And we talked about all these functions during the Illustrator demo, so we're not going to talk about them here. One thing we are going to talk about though is this right here. So you might notice that there is the A or the character formatting up here, and then there's the P or the paragraph formatting down here. So these two are things you're going to be constantly clicking back and forth through. I use this basically when I'm adjusting sort of like fonts, type size, that kind of thing, and this much more when I'm adjusting the general paragraph. So for example, if we wanted to center a line, this is like where I go, even though you can adjust it here. However, if your window is slightly smaller, sometimes these things get hidden. It's much easier for me to just do it from here. We can also do indents and adjust, the space before, which I love, and all sorts of these kinds of things. Over here, there's also the hyphenation, which I think you guys will probably get a lot of use out of. Hyphenations get a really bad rep, I think, and partially I think it's well deserved. They look quite ugly a lot of the times, and they can break up your words in really weird places and all that. However, hyphenation is really great for creating nice looking paragraphs, especially when you're using smaller type. So for example, in your body copy, if you're just like creating a normal book with a lot of text, you want to actually have hyphenations on, and you can adjust how many hyphenations you have per paragraph, and you'll learn more about that next year. But if you notice, like right here, this gap right here is like insane and looks quite ugly in comparison to like these 3 lines down here. When you turn on hyphenation, that kind of issue goes away and you get like these much better looking paragraphs. And the reason why I want to discuss that is you will have a lot of times where you really need to turn off hyphenation, and with text as big as it is right now, you probably do want to turn off hyphenation, and like titles and really large headlines, you want to turn off hyphenation. But when you're doing body copy and captions and that kind of thing, it's totally valid to have your hyphenations on because it'll just make the shape of your paragraph look better. I will say, if you have any additional questions about type, like any of these like really small type things, refer back to that Illustrator demo. It definitely goes way more in depth than we're going to go in here. We're sort of just going to talk about the new stuff in this video. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about real quick. So for example, you see that this is overset type right here, and we talked about this error already. So what if we didn't want to create another text box, but we just wanted to make sure that all the text here was being shown? So what we can do is we can double click here at the bottom, and it'll open up the text box all the way to the most bottom portion of this text box. You can also use this if you just want to make sure that the text box is aligned to the very bottom of the bottommost text. So you can do that and just double click it to close it up a little bit. The same thing works for the other side, so you can always use that if needed. And that's it for the first part of this lesson, so I'll meet you guys over in the next part.